Okay, hello. I think after some time I'm coming back to RefreshColombo. So Nasli sent me a message saying it's been some time since you came back to RefreshColombo, and he said there are some, would you like to talk about Steve Jobs? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? And of course, once he asked me for that, I said, okay. I remembered Chanux, who is one of my good friends. You guys might remember us from Single Enforce, right? The guys who used to do Single Enforce, right? They're sort of on seasonal break. You want to call it seasonal break? Or?
I don't know.
It's been a long time. So because the reason I thought of him was because I don't know whether you follow Chanux he's on Twitter, and he seemed to be very emotionally distressed when the Steve Jobs death announcement came through. Of course, I was shocked as well, but not as shocked as I might have been, because I did get a glimpse of his photo before he died, where he was very skinny. So when I saw that, I was very distressed at that point, and I actually forwarded that to Chanux and said, I don't think this guy is going to make it till the end of the year. So I had that feeling that he might not, but of course we were secretly wishing he would. And it's kind of ironic how just the day after Apple announced stuff that he like held on to that last minute, and of course then he passed away. So what we want to do today is we want to talk about not Steve Jobs' life or remembering what great things he did. I think there's a lot of that's happened over the last week, and there has been a lot of information on the internet for you to find out. Instead, what we thought is we wanted to sort of capture what is great about Steve Jobs and what we could possibly learn on some of those greatness that he has. Obviously, Steve Jobs is not a black and white figure. He's a very complicated, a very grayscale kind of a guy. And as much as there are good stuff about him, there are some bad stuff about him as well. I don't know whether you know about it, but we're not going to go into that because this is about what we can learn out of it. And
also we don't want to learn bad things.
Yeah, we don't want to learn bad things. And the other thing is, this is mostly our brain dumps, both of our brain dumps of what we know about Steve over the years. And I want to start out by saying we're not fanboys of Apple, right? Of course, I have some Apple products, and
he has a lot.
Yeah, I have a few.
I don't own anything Apple.
He doesn't own anything, which is more surprising to me.
Yeah.
When he was more distressed because he hasn't really used a lot of Apple products. He hasn't used any Apple products except seeing other people use it. So what's up, Chanux? Why? Actually, I've been meaning to ask you why.
Yeah, because I can't really support Apple products.
No, not that. That's not the question. Why are you so connected with Steve Jobs and you haven't really used some of the great stuff he's done?
When I started love computing, the first people I got to know about Bill Gates, Steve Wozniak, the boss, and this guy, Steve Jobs, and all those people. And so at that time I didn't know about anything about Linux, free software, or anything. So these are the guys I started to love.
So these were your idols from the beginning, but you just couldn't afford a Mac at the time.
Yeah.
Now you can. Okay, so we'll get started because we have a lot of slides of various quotes. So what we thought is we'll go through quotes and use that to sort of give our insight on how that quote is going to change stuff. So I hope this wireless thing works. It doesn't seem to so far. Come on. Okay. So first of all, we thought we would characterize what Steve Jobs is, and he's a lot of things. As I said, he's a complicated guy. But up and foremost for us, my handle is Geekaholic, by the way, for people who don't know. I'm a geek, and I've used Linux for years, and now these days I use a Mac. I've run Linux for most of the time on the Mac, but recently I started using Lion as well. And one of the things that I find nice about Steve Jobs is he's really a geek. He was a geek to begin with, and most people see him more of a marketing kind of a guy, but he is really a geek, right? Because
and there's a lot of people who think that he's just a marketer, a salesman, other than a geek. But there's something geek in him. Without that,
definitely. He knew electronics. He had built stuff like, he had done a frequency counter, for example. That's one of the things that I've heard from Steve Wozniak, who got together. And this is a picture of him holding this thing called a blue box. Yeah, blue box, which is, it's basically they've discovered, well, they found an article and they've managed to take over a phone line, which is called phone phreaking, and make free IDD calls by sort of whistling in with this frequency. So there was at the time, it was all based on the same signals for control signals were sent with the voice together. So they managed to do it. So that's a very geeky kind of thing to do. And they used to pull pranks on people, and they used to do a lot of geeky things together. So he was a geek, but he was also an artist in a way, because he always viewed everything as art and life, and he had a very deep insight into that. And he tried to, I think, combine technology and really make it into like a world-class, like an art kind of product, right? Because that's how you get the feeling about Apple products. That's why most people get this feeling about Apple products, because he tried to not treat it as, you know, tech stuff, but try to say, how can you make it really, you know, part of your fashion? Or so it's just like your watch, or it's just like your car. You know, you feel a bit passionate about those things, right?
And when we talk about he being an artist, there's the story that he made all the Apple engineers who contributed in creating some kind. I can't remember the model name.
Mm-hmm.
The machine. He made the engineers sign inside.
Yeah, I think that was Apple II. Yes, yes.
Apple II, yes. So it said that we know that normally artists normally sign their work. Right?
Yes,
so
yes.
That's the spirit.
That's the spirit.
Why he made the engineers sign inside the machine.
And he was probably very much greatly known for his showmanship. He was able to go on stage and dazzle everybody, sort of put them into a trance, where at the end of the show, you're like, okay, where do I go and put my credit card and buy that product? You know, so he managed to sort of pitch you. And it sort of took you a little bit of time until the next morning when you woke up and wondered, what was I thinking last night, kind of a, you know. So he did manage to sort of, you know, and they call this the distortion field, right? Steve Jobs distortion, reality distortion field, right? And
he said that even the people who know that, even the guy who invented the word, I mean, who created the term, also was helpless at this distortion field of Steve Jobs. The guy was Bud Tribble.
Yeah, and we just lost. Okay, there it is. So he's so many other things. Of course, you know, he's very secretive. He's very personal. He's very private. We know very little about his private life. Hopefully, we'll know a little bit more when the book comes out. He's a perfectionist. He's very ruthless in some sense. You know, I think he drove a lot of employees mad because he wanted things very perfectly, and he has fired people on the spot, right? And without any notice. I think if you watch one of the movie called Pirates of Silicon Valley, I think if you get a chance to watch it, it sort of features some of his stuff. In one of the interviews, you know, he asked some personal questions about, are you a virgin, kind of a thing. So, and then he basically doesn't hire that guy. And obviously he was an iconic figure, which is why we're going to be talking about him. And I think for years to come, people are going to be analyzing him and dissecting what he's done. We're going to look at certain things that he said, some of the quotes, and I thought some of the inspirational quotes that he's done. Obviously, his Stanford speech that he did is considered as one of the best speeches of all time. And his story about connecting the dots, where, you know, you need to trust in yourself and hope that things are going to work out in the future, because you cannot really know about it until you go back, until you go to the future. You cannot properly know that how sometimes you may have an experience where you have a tragedy, some kind of a big mess up, you get fired or something happens, right? And at the time you think, I'm so unlucky, right? But then that changes you, that experience changes you, and then somewhere in the future you look back and say, I'm glad that happened, otherwise I would have been doing something else. And that's always been the case. I mean, if you just think about yourself, things that has happened to you, worst things that has happened to you, and if you're actually not a very down, negative kind of a person, you always see that there's something positive that happened out of it. And that's what he sort of said is, that is the case. So therefore, if something bad happens, don't get despaired. Just keep going at it. And I think this is a very good kind of a quote that I'd like to take. Chanux, you want to take the next one?
Yeah.
Is it the first time you're saying this? Because I did the presentation.
Yeah, that's the case. Yes, moving on. Well, there's the saying that he had the special ability to kill the baby, like knife the baby. Like there are so many products that you love. You may, as a geek, you may build products and make software, whatever, and you start to love that, and you stay with that, and you don't want to leave that, right? But Steve Jobs was different. He could knife the baby when he sees that the baby doesn't fit the future plan, right? So that's what he did, and I think that's one key part of his.
Yeah, I think one is that, yes, ability to kill things that are not needed. One of the things he did is when he got back to Apple is to kill like the Newton, which was a PDA, one of the early PDAs. But the other aspect is sometimes we do something great, right? We do a hit, and then our ego goes up a lot, right? Our ego level just goes up, and we are constantly then talking about it. There are people that they're still talking about things they did long time ago, and they've never done things beyond that because they think they've hit the high point and there's no way of going any higher. But Steve Jobs has kept on reinventing things over and over. He's had a hit after hit. And the reason is he doesn't get tied in with the ego. He just moves on to the next thing. He does something great, and then he says, okay, what else can I do? And he moves on to the next thing. And I think that's a very good lesson for us as well. It's not to get too caught up in something great that you do. You be happy that you did something great, but then you got to say, okay, now what's next? Right? And here's another very good thing. The first thing I did when I got to Apple was to get rid of the old stuff. And that's another thing of looking forward. Now, as most of you would probably know, Steve Jobs got fired from Apple. And then he did all the other stuff. And then he got back. And when he got back, he just cleaned the slate clean. And the way he did that was, at the time in their office, in the Apple office, they had reminders of some of the great stuff they've done, like the Mac, the first Mac, the Lisa, the Apple II, all that, right? And what he did was he donated all of that to Stanford, and he got rid of all the previous, all the documents and everything, and he just gave it to Stanford as archival. And he said, we're going to start, new. We're going to look at it from a new perspective. And I think that's important from time to time. You need to, not hold on to the old stuff. You need to start looking at, the future. Don't get too caught up in the past.
And also, if you try to connect the dots now we can see that it was the beginning of all this. We are talking about him right now. Millions of people miss him, and that's because this little beginning, right? He let the past go away and started anew.
So this is of course another one which I think on the Stanford talk he let us know about, is that every day since a very long time he was looking at his every day as, if today is the last day of my life, would I be doing what I'm about to do today? And I think a lot of us, if you look at it from that point of view, you see that time is really time is very precious, and you have very limited time to live. And most of us, the amount of time we can be productive is limited. Once you get old, you may not be able to be as productive. So there's always a race against time, and what are you going to do that's going to matter? And that, I think a lot of the things that drove him, he was working pretty much till very close to his death. He quit Apple, and not even 2 months passed before he died, right? And that even when he quit, he was completely still thinking about what's the next thing we should do, and he was advising, and he was always thinking about the work and his legacy. So I think there's going to be a lot of influential stuff. There's actually going to be very few influential stuff. One is he was able to influence people. For example, when they were building the first Apple I, he managed to score some free chips from Intel by just talking to them and talking to the sales rep saying, you know, you need to get some of these things to try it out. And he managed to pitch it and get that. And he's done many of those things, like when he wanted to sell music, right, trying to convince the record labels that they should sell it at 99 cents a pop. It was a big, you know, a big thing, because at the time they were like all this Napster and all this piracy going on with music.
And
they
also,
were like
also getting AT&T to sell his phone. His
exactly.
phone the way he
the way he wants it. Because if you look at the phones before the iPhone came, especially the ones that came with contract, had a lot of logos of operators, and you know, he had branding at the back, you know, Vodafone and all this and that. And he managed to, he said to the operators, you know, you guys worry about the network, we'll worry about the phone and all the features. And he just managed to decouple that and to negotiate that with the big giants like AT&T. You know, that takes a lot of, you know, skill. And one popular one is he went up to what's his name, John Scully, who was the CEO at Pepsi Cola, and he said, do you want to sell sugar and water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come and change the world with me? And he managed to get convince him, because here's Apple, a startup, and this guy is working at Pepsi Cola, which is, you know, a big corporation with a very steady income, and it's, you know, it's doing quite well. But to get him to, you know, leave that and come work for a startup, right? That's convincing. So insight is actually what we have a lot. Now, one of the things Steve Jobs did a lot, of course, is he took the good stuff from other people as well, and he quoted that. Some of the stuff, okay, we actually got popular. I mean, it got popularized because of he quoted it. Now, one of these is he usually quotes this guy called Alan Kay, which I don't know whether many of you know. He's really a brilliant guy as well, Alan Kay, right? And you should read about him on Wikipedia. He's done a lot of cool stuff. So basically, there's a quote: people who are serious about software should do their own hardware, and that's why Apple has always been about vertical integration. They don't try to, like, as opposed to Microsoft, who wants to build the software which works on multiple hardware platforms. Apple has always been about the total experience, and they have full control of that by controlling the hardware and the software. And Apple identifies itself actually as a software company, even though if you ask a lame person what's Apple about, they'll say it's about the iPods, it's about the hardware, right? It's about the cool Macs. But they're really a software company, and the hardware is the way they actually package it. So it's really software packaged in the hardware. The other one is, it's not the customer's job to know what they want. Now, this is something that still the industry breaks a lot. You know, you are starting a new product, but first thing you want to do is you want to do a customer survey, right? You want to go and ask the customers, what do you want in this? And then, you know, you probably give them a list of features, and then you do a customer survey. Well, Steve Jobs said customers don't know what they want until they see it for the first time, right? If the customers knew what they want, you know, they would probably be building it themselves. They'll probably, you know, start doing that. So some customers who do know what they want is people like Steve Jobs.
Customers always want more, bigger things, or maybe smaller things. Whatever they say, they always want more, better, but they just can't define what's better. If you ask a customer that, what do you think better is,
they can't properly give an answer. Now, one example is Henry Ford said, if I had asked customers what they wanted, they would have said, well, I wanted a faster horse, right? So, you know, you can't ask customers, especially when you're doing something completely new. And here's another one that I really like about Steve Jobs. This is a really good quote. I don't think it's just his quote, but I think this is something that he's executed quite well, is focusing is about saying no. It's not about saying yes, right? A lot of companies get into the trap of features, adding this, adding that, trying to do a lot of things. And sometimes you need to just focus on one thing and do it quite well. And that's what has succeeded for Apple, right? They've not, today if you look at it, you may not see that, because you see, okay, they have so many things. They have the iPad, they have the Apple TV, they have the iPad, the iPhone, and so on. But if you look at it from the history, they've done just one thing at one given time, and they focused on that for a couple of years, and then they've gone on to the next thing, right?
And also, whenever some i product comes out, it will come out and say that this one doesn't have these features, have that, and all that. But it somehow eventually goes to the popularity it has to them.
I mean, when the iPhone came out, everybody compared it with the Nokias and said, you can't even send an MMS on this thing. It doesn't even have 3G, right? It's got lousy battery life, right? Or it drops the call every once in a while, every 5 minutes or whatever, apparently, in the US because of AT&T. So, with all that, still, and it was $600 to begin with, right? Of course, they brought down the price very soon. They bought it because it did something else very well. It addressed some of the fundamental usability issues, and that was the first time people actually fell in love with a phone, as opposed to just thinking about a phone as just another tool, right? I mean, I didn't have an iPhone. In the beginning, I had an iPod Touch. I bought it quite impulsively, something that I regretted actually after buying. And after about 6 months, I lost it. Somebody stole it. And I was like really devastated. I was thinking things are not permanent. I was like becoming kind of religious about the whole thing, because it's like I lost someone. And you get that emotional connection with some of these Apple products, like Chanux would know. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Here's another cool one. We're the biggest startup on the planet, right? As you know, Apple is one of the biggest companies, and as a company gets big, they lose some of their startup, some of the innocence of startup, right? And startups are really agile companies. They are able to turn around products, do stuff very quickly, and if the customer says, after they put it out, the customer says, this is not good, they can quickly turn it around. But big companies, large companies, they have committees.
They have the capability to innovate, actually.
Yes.
The bigger companies have burden behind them.
So much of red tape. So much of red tape, right? So the way Apple is organized, well, according to Steve, I don't know, but is that there are individual people responsible. One guy is responsible for the iPhone development, one guy for the iOS, one guy for the iPad, one guy for marketing, like that. Just one guy, right? And all he does is every day he goes and talks with every single guy. Okay, says, okay, what can we do better? What are you doing? What's up? Any problem? So he's like just multitasking, going and talking to everyone. And it's a very startup kind of a way of doing things. You don't have a lot of hierarchy. And one thing he said in one of the D8 interviews, says, do you know how many committees we have at Apple? And he said 0. You don't have any committees responsible for coming up with something, right? Anybody can come up with an idea, they can throw at it, they probably get knocked down, they have to fight for it, and then the good ideas win, and then they start doing stuff. And the whole thing about not being run by hierarchy, this is a very good motto. You have to be run by ideas, not hierarchy. The best ideas have to win, or great people won't stay, right? And this is a picture of Jonathan Ive, if you remember, the guy who actually designed most of the stuff, the Mac. The hardware design is done by Jonathan Ive, and he's now a Sir Jonathan Ive, I believe. He's been given the knighthood. And these guys wouldn't stay. They'll probably get a lot of offers from all over the place, but they're staying here because they know they can change the world while they're staying at Apple, right? Or any company for that matter. So to keep good people in your organization, you got to trust in them. You got to, let them do their stuff. And if they have a good idea, and you're the boss, you shouldn't, say that because I'm the boss. This is the way it's going to happen. You might fight with the guy, but then if he's got a better idea, you got to go with it. Here's another one. The way we have succeeded is by choosing which host to write very carefully, right? This again goes back to the startup culture, which is there are so many things that you could do, and sometimes you have so many ideas, right? But you can't do all of it. This is about saying no, right? So you got to say no to a lot of things, and you got to pick your right host. So it's like the reason he's using the word host is it's a bet, but it's a bet based on what you know about what you think is going to happen, and you make that bet and you go with it, right?
If you think hard enough about it, all these qualities we talk about actually add up to being a startup, and even at this level.
Yeah.
Apple is a huge corporation, but it's staying as a startup. They are maintaining a startup culture because they have all these key points. what Steve puts in Apple, right?
I think most of these advices are very good for startups. They're also good for big corporations, but maybe they're already polluted and it's too late for them to come back, you know. But for startups who are aspiring to be big corporations, these are good stuff to really get into. So here's another one, is good artists copy, great artists steal. This is, of course, was initially said by Van Gogh, something again Steve promoted a lot. And the idea between copying and stealing, right, in this context, is that when you're copying, you try to copy the same thing. It's like doing a Xerox of it. You do a photocopy, kind of. So you do the same thing. You don't try to innovate much. You try to get the advantage of the successful product by copying it. It's a clone, right? Versus stealing, right? For one thing is, when you steal an idea, you generally don't give credit to the person you stole it from, right? So that's where part of the stealing, the word steal comes from, because you're not giving credit, right? And this is what Apple did, sort of, when they initially created the GUI, which was originally created as Xerox, right? The whole windowing interface was a research thing that Xerox came up with, but Steve Jobs went in and he saw this and he got excited and he managed to convince Xerox to let most of the engineers see this, and they went back and they didn't copy it. They just stole it. Right? They stole the idea, but then they implemented themselves and they fixed some of the problems they saw in that, and they made it better. Right? That's what stealing is about. So that's what he meant. So he says good artists copy, but I don't know whether you want to call them good artists even, because these days there are a lot of copycats. But great artists steal. Okay, some of the values that Steve has is, one thing is, he's all about creating stuff that are insanely great. Right? He wants to, and this is part of his perfectionist kind of a view, which is something should just be really, really good, really, really great. And the first time he used this word insanely great was when he was doing the Macintosh, when he introduced the Macintosh.
Also, they had this advertisement saying that here's for the crazy one and all that.
Yes, the thing different.
He was actually not out to make products for the crazy ones, but actually,
that's true.
The way I see that is he wanted the people outside of the geek, I mean the tech culture, come in and innovate on computers. And he wanted artists, maybe biology people, everyone come in and use computer power to innovate in their own fields. So
yeah, I think he had, in his first team, he had a lot of artists working on the Macintosh, especially. Here's another one, is that, you know, now he's the CEO, or the ICEO in the beginning, the interim CEO, and then he became the CEO. One of the things he said is he's not interested in market share. And, you know, Windows had the majority of the market share in the personal computer world, and he didn't really care that Windows had the highest market share. He was just not happy that what they put out was crap, is what he said. It's not good stuff, right? And that's the only issue he had with it. He's not upset that they were very successful. And he said, Microsoft deserves the success they did, but what they're doing is not good stuff. And that's what it was. And he was never looking at it from a point of a market share. How do we increase the market share, right? He was looking at it in the point of view of how do we make great, you know, the best products. And also the fact that you cannot con people in the long term when you do business, right? Now, advertising in a way is a con, right? And even the advertising that Apple does is a con in the beginning, right? But once you buy the product, say you get conned, or you get suckered into buying it, right? You want to call it. That's marketing, right? But after that, if you feel that, you know, I've been actually suckered in, this is not doing the job that it was advertised to do, then you feel betrayed, and then, you know, that affects your brand name. Now, one thing that Apple does, for example, if they say 10 hours of battery life, what happens is when they do independent testing, it's like 10 and a half hours or 11 hours of battery life. It beats expectations, right? Where, you know, usually what happens in the marketing terms is you give the best case scenario as your number. For example, you guys remember in wattage, there was this thing called PMPO watts, so it's 550 watts, right? But it turns out that you get that at the peak, at a very, you can't even hear it. So it's 550 PMPO, but its RMS value, which is the mean value that you get, is about 100 watts, right? I'm just talking about a stereo amp, like when they advertise stereo amps, for example. And same thing with, you know, the CPU speed, right? You know, at a time they kept on increasing it, just because of the number looks good, right? And they were, you know, again there was certain thing they were screwing around, which is not really indicative. So conning at that level is not good, is what he's saying basically. And real artistship is basically another one, which is if you're just working on stuff and you don't put it out, you know, it's not worthwhile. You know, you need to put something out for others to experience it. And this is what he means, real artistship. Here's another comment he made, being the richest man in the cemetery doesn't matter to me, right? So he wasn't really, I mean, he's a business guy, but he wasn't really obsessed with money, right, if you put it that way. Right? For example, his salary was $1 for the whole year. As the CEO of Apple, he made $1. And the reason the $1 is you need to, as a board member, you need to be getting a salary for it to be legally, to be a board member, and that was $1 he made for the whole year. Right? So he wasn't, you know, he had enough money, but he wasn't, and he's not the richest guy also. If you look at the top list, he's not even in the top 10 or the top 20, I think.
Yeah, he didn't want to be the richest guy.
He didn't want to be the richest guy.
He didn't want to have the biggest market share
yes.
or anything, but what he believed in was making great things.
Yes.
Making what he believes in and presenting it to the people.
Yeah.
And
but it is also known that he publicly, as far as we know, he's never given money to charity either. Right? So, of course, it could be that he's a very private guy and he didn't do it under his name. Right? But as far as we know, he didn't do that either. But he was very focused on what he's just doing, you know, and he didn't want to grow his money in a big way. He didn't give away money. It wasn't about the money thing, basically. Okay, and this is one of my favorites, which is the one more thing, is that, you know, usually from time to time, randomly, to give a bit of randomness, he does his one more thing way of launching. Some of the good products were launched as one more things, right? And I think this is a good invention in terms of presentation, is to surprise people. People like to be surprised. It's like pulling a rabbit out of the hat, you know, at the last minute. People thought it's like the encore, you know. Well, it's not the encore because people are asking for it, but this is like unexpectedly and suddenly one more thing. And he's done this a couple of times, and it's very theatrical, and I don't know whether we can get much out of it, but I think, so I guess the idea is you want to surprise customers. And that basically comes to the end of our presentation and the favorite picture of Chanux.
And says, stay hungry, stay foolish. This one comes from a Stanford speech he made at...
I'm done anyway. So this was actually his apartment or his house or whatever you want to call it, is that he didn't want to buy anything at the time because he just thought it wasn't good enough. So he didn't think that it was worth buying. And this is the guy who is thinking that he could do something better. Right? Because he's not good enough, he doesn't want to buy it. Actually, there was a comment by Larry Ellison that says he says the difference between me and Steve is that I'm willing to live with what the best the world has to offer, where Steve doesn't want to do that. He's going to make the best. He's not going to take what the world has to offer him. Okay, so I think that's it. Thank you.